All right, I think we are ready to start now. So welcome everyone to this first PTC Nordic Talks webinar after a few weeks of winter breaks. And for today, we are excited by having Erik Løber, Managing Director, and Peter Porta, Senior Business Consultant from both PLM, as our next guest speakers. And their topic is about document management. Don't manage chaos, create a solid ground to start from. But first of all, for those who are still new to the Nordic Talks webinars, my name is Torbjörn Peterson, and I'm the Partner Ecosystem Manager for PTC in the Nordics. And we are running these webinars every week, same time, where we invite customers and partners for some inspiration on any hot topics in digital transformation to see what is possible and how to make things happen. And all of our past webinars have also been recorded and are to be found on the registration site for this event. And the agenda for today is first a quick overview of PTC by my colleague Carl Jansson from the IoT AR team. And then Peter will start by introducing the company, both PLM, and then touch base on a few challenges regarding PLM, how to address these, and then explain the business outcomes. And at the end, we will also have a Q&A session, so please keep your questions to the end. But the first of us, over to you, Carl.
Great, thank you, Tobe. So, short introduction about PTC. That is a 30 years old international software company whose headquarters is based in Boston. We provide software for mainly manufacturing enterprises with a focus on digital transformation. We started with CAD and PLM, and now since a few years, we're introducing SaaS, IoT, and augmented reality. I will transfer to Peter now. I'll let you take over the presentation.
No problem. Thank you very much. Just a second. Thank you, Torbjörn. Thank you, Carl, for giving us the opportunity to present here today. My name is Peter Porta, and I come from a consultancy called Boost PLM. And before we get started, I'd like to just briefly introduce Boost PLM to you. We focus on the gap that often exists between engineering and operations, and we do that on multiple levels. We address, of course, the IT, the technical part, but also the process level and the digital strategy level. Our core technical competences lie within Windchill, SAP, ThingWorx, and we have a very solid understanding of the processes in engineering and production, as we've been working in these domains ourselves for many years. Our formal partnerships lie with PTC and SAP, and our clients are to be found in the Nordics, among the large industrial companies in the discrete manufacturing industry. But today is about document management, and I've been looking very much forward to talk about that interesting topic. Although I must admit, document management is not on the cutting edge of technology, but despite that, it still remains one of the major capabilities every company must master. We have a lot of new tendencies and approaches going on, like model-based definition or passing on data from the PLM system directly into the shop floor systems. All of this, of course, will reduce the amount of documents, and that's great. But there will be many documents still remaining in the ecosystem of every company that needs to be managed. Today's presentation will not focus that much on the technical part, but more on the main prerequisites that we have identified and worked with our clients. The picture or the situation we meet at our clients can be described by this picture. We very often meet a unorganized or degraded structured setup where the repositories for documents and the regimes for managing them is scattered around and creates a lot of issues for the users. Also, our clients are lacking transparency into the life of a document and the validity of a document, and I could mention a lot of more issues. I think the time is not for that, and you probably know many of them yourselves. What our clients are asking for is a well-organized, well-structured setup that is maintainable, and also where we have a one source of truth, where people can both place and interact with documents in a unified way. Transparency into the life of a document from cradle to grave, and especially a granular control of the document and its status when we talk about the important documents that needs to be managed. This is also high on the wish list. Now, all of this, of course, requires a solid foundation and a solid document management tool. And as you are here on this PTC initiative, I assume you either already have Windchill or you are in the process of buying it. So that means you already have a powerful document management system at hand. Unfortunately, having a document management system itself as a tool is not sufficient. Now my screen goes all green. It also takes a lot of other prerequisites, and these are the prerequisites basically we like to talk with you about. We have I grayed out the top box because the tool is seldomly the issue. In many cases, it can do much more that an organization needs or is capable of or willing to do. But the other 4 boxes you see, these are the ones that we'd like to address today. So it's governance and ownership of the system, of the document management system. It's the classification and attribution. It's the review and approval process, and of course the user behavior and the management focus. These parts I will talk you through, and it's based on the implementation experiences we have. For your guidance on where we are in the presentation, you will find a little icon in the top left of the slide that indicates which topic we are dealing with. Now let's jump to the first one, which would be the user behavior and the focus of the management. When we introduce functionality by a document management system, it's if you don't have anything to start with, you'll probably perceive this as a restriction of freedom, and the users will give a bit of pushback. Once we advance to more advanced functionality that also have a higher value proposition to the people will actually experience that this is a help for the daily work, and it makes the daily operation much more robust and effective. And so it's important to move up and bring functionality to the users in their daily life. Now, management's role in this is, of course, to make sure that there is the span of focus of management has to be long enough to do this, because all of these things don't come overnight, and they need to be in it for the long run. So make sure that you have backup from management on this, also for the long perspective, and then they understand the long commitment this requires, and also make sure that you always have some kind of monitoring of the behavior and the acceptance among people, because it does impact the setups. That was the first one. The second one is governance. Governance is it's one of my favorites because it has such a big impact, and it's a bit overlooked, and it's mostly dealt with when it becomes a problem. And the best advice is make sure that you have governance discussed and in place as early as possible. Best would be to have it to start with. Now, you might ask, what is there to govern? And I can assure you there's a lot to govern, especially when you look at what happens if governance is not sufficiently present. I have an illustration here. You can see the left, the straight arrow that symbolizes a setup which is might not be fancy, but it's functioning. It provides some basic functionality, and naturally enough, people come with suggestions. But due to the lack of governance, these suggestions that might come from different departments or individuals, and it's basically, of course, based on their understanding and their priorities. So the lack of governance then is the reason why the system gradually gets more and more complex and more unmanageable, because all of these suggestions, they are proposed out of a very narrow understanding of what is for the greater good. And at the end of the day, this leads to silos. Every part of the organization that needs to govern their documents, they will retract into themselves because the system as a total is not functioning good enough. So they will make sure that their documents are under control and their needs are fulfilled. And that, of course, jeopardizes the greater good. And the interaction between those silos, that would be handled manually. And manually interactions, it is cumbersome, it's error prone, and it's very inefficient. And the lack of stability of this setup, the lack of robustness, is also the reason why this kind of foundation will never enable you to grow and to advance to the functions that you really want. So governance is important. What happens if you have clear governance is that you also have a vision and a direction. You make sure that you know where you would like to go. You have a long-term ambition. You broke it down to milestones, and you have a orchestration of every important decision taken in doc management. And if you do that, then you are actually able to prioritize and evaluate all suggestions and make every improvement stand on top of previous ones, pointing in the same direction. And that is a big difference. Now, what it creates at the end of the day is, just need to move a bit, is a setup where automation and the manual interactions go hand in hand and create a setup that is robust and that is stable and that can evolve. And that, of course, is much more efficient than the previous picture. Now, all of this sounds a bit abstract maybe. The way we work with governance with our clients is to make it tangible. We, for the topic of document management, we identified 7 task areas, and each task area consists of a set of specific tasks that needs to be carried out. And each of them is being discussed with the client in terms of the content, but especially in terms of who is accountable, who is responsible for doing these tasks. And it can be politically tricky because it touches the balance of power. Previously, in some cases, everyone was allowed to poke in the system, and now suddenly it's a very defined regime who is able and allowed to do what. And it's necessary, but it takes time to get there. Please be prepared to have patience and please be persistent. Also, a good advice would be to make sure that it's pragmatic. Some of things you will encounter problems, and then you probably need to go around them in order to have it working. Now the second column, is also a very important one, is document classification. It goes along unnoticed for many people, but it is basically in the background for a lot of interactions and with the system and interactions in the system. So when people are placing a document, it happens on the basis of the classification. When they are searching and retrieving documents, it's based on that. The access control, the workflows or the system behavior, all of this is impacted by the classification of documents. And it makes a big difference if you have a sound and stable classification or if you have not. Now, we have identified 3 characteristics that we find especially important. You can see them in the green box down here. The first one, which should be that your classification structure should be sufficient deep in its structure. That means we need structure enough to fuel the business needs, but we should not go beyond that point. We should not make structure deeper than necessary, because deep structures need to be maintained. There's a housekeeping to do, and also it adds complexity. Another characteristic that's important is that your structure remains stable and relevant. Now, stable and relevant is especially obvious when we see sometimes our clients have made structures that are based on organizational entities or topics. So if they make a structure breakdown based on some topics or some way they have organized, these things tend to change. The companies we've worked with do reorganize quite a lot, and you don't want to have to maintain your classification structure every time you reorganize, and because that would probably also give you a maintenance task into your systems, because they will be based on this classification structure. The last one in the bottom is the acceptance or the understanding of the structure. If a structure is well understood and easy to explain, it is much more likely to be followed, and you will have a much better impact on the user behavior. In the following slide, I'd like to give you our proposal, our viewpoint on a structure that would be appropriate for a manufacturing industry that does product development. And I'd like to walk you through it. You can see the just a second. Jeg mangler strøm på min computer. We have in every company, we have a lot of processes that generate the product design, and we have the process design. These are the ones you can see in the top. Then, of course, we have the value chain that has activities throughout the product's life cycle. And the product value chain, or the value chain, needs to be fueled with input. So we need to pass on documentation to it that specifies what they're supposed to do. So that could be the drawing that we pass on to the purchase department for purchasing. Or it could be the work instruction that we pass on to the assembly line in order to execute. Or it could be the service manual that we give to our service people in maintenance. Now, these kind of documents, they origin from the product and process design. But the product and process design create a lot more content than just these specifications that we pass down to the value chain. Because there, in order to get to the final design, you have made concept studies, you have made cost analysis, FMEAs, you have made simulation models, you have made any kind of important decisions or evaluations. And if you at some later point of time would like to redo or change your design, you would like to have access, and you must have access to these things, so they need to be under management as well. So these make out the second category. So that's what we at Boost call design documentation. Now the third category are the records, and these records are the output of the value chain. These are records of specific actions that are being carried out, or it could be specific entities that create records. And all of this together, all these green boxes, they make out the top node of the classification structure. Of course, these needs to be broken down because it's very, very generic. So for every company, there will be a process of breaking down. Now this example is taking the production specification and breaking it down. I just put into an example here the work instructions and the inspection instructions. And this is the level we call the subtypes. And of course, there will be much, much more. And this is where the workload lies in the projects, because very often we have existing structures in companies, and they need to be dissolved and reorganized. And in there lies a lot of discussions. The labels in the bottom, they just indicate that the structure gets more and more unstable the more you go down. And of course, you want to choose the stable one that you want to base your automation on and your system behavior, because otherwise a change to the structure will trigger maintenance needs of your workflows and system behavior. So our recommendation, go with the most stable one, which would be the top node. Only if you're really confident and have proven it, you can use the lower parts of the structure. Now that was the second or the third column. Now the fourth one and last one is the review and approval. And review and approval is very important for a document setup, because you need to be able to place trust in your documents, especially the documents you pass on to your to the downstream for people to execute on. There must be some mechanism in place that assures the quality and the validity of these. And it will be handled differently in all companies. There might be existing systems for doing this. So what I can present here today is one example we have made with the client as part of a proof of concept. And our client had the need of having granular control from the birth of a document until it got approved, and wanted to be able to have a granular insight in what was the status and all the activities going on with the document. Furthermore, a lot of people outside the Windchill environment needed to be able to participate, internal and external, and there were a lot of other use cases as well. We evaluated, of course, a lot of possibilities, and one of them was to build it up as a separate workflow, and that's the solution I like to present. So what you can see, we implemented quite detailed and complex workflow in Windchill in order to give the functionality. And due to the fact that we had two main groups of users, one of them being Windchill savvy, that could be the daily users, typically the engineers. They were used to work in Windchill and were not frightened about how to interact with it. And then we have a very large group of users. They had very low or no Windchill prerequisites, and Windchill was not the right tool for them to interact with for this sole purpose of reviewing and approving documents. So in order to get them on board and to create this, the awareness that they have to engage directly in the workflow, we created a set of ThingWork apps and modeled all of this up in our own ecosystem at Boost PLM as a proof of concept and passed it on to the client to evaluate further. And the most important part is to make sure that review and approval is not only something people with access to the core system can do, but you have to think into it that people outside the normal system also need to be able to participate. Because if you don't do that, you will have all of it flowing around in emails and being shared on several drives, and then things tend to get out of hand again. Now, I'm running late. I can see the time is running, so I have to hurry a bit. So to wrap it up, we have created a solid foundation, and we have done a lot of, in each box, a lot of specific activities together with our client. And now the client has a stable foundation on which they can evolve and build up the functionality. And the most important thing, I think, is in this regard is that it's all anchored and governed, and there is a roadmap for it. So it has a stable future in forthcoming, and that's great. Okay, I think I spent the time. If you want to learn more about document management or some of the other topics we work with, please reach out. We will be very happy to engage in a conversation with you. And if you have questions to document management and what I just talked about, I will be very happy to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing a lot of exciting insights. So actually now over to you in the audience for any questions you might have, Peter and Erik as well.
Yeah, hi Erik, this is Hemant here.
So now I can hear something.
Hi Hemant.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, very well.
So Erik, what kind of standards that you follow for designing your DMS system? Like, do you follow specific to, UNSPSC or ECMA or, ISO standards for this DMS system that you have actually created?
We work also with parts classification. And in that regard, we, of course, apply, for example, UNSPSC, the structure for the classification when we talk external components. But when it comes to document management, we rely on this structure that I just showed you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There is a question from the chat from Thomas Roxniak. Hi Peter, what is the minimum number of levels that can be feasible enough? Maybe Thomas, if you want to, or is it clear, the question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I think you refer to the document classification structure. So if you remember the picture with the green boxes, that would be the top node. So that would be level 1. Then you go down, and I would say 2 to 3 levels. That should be sufficient. What you definitely should avoid is any wishes for, I like a level for, let's say, a topic like a PPAP, because then you have these topics, or you have an organization and say, I want work instructions organization A, work instructions organization B. And stuff like that you should avoid. You should just have work instructions and then deal with it. At some point, the attributes can take over to distinguish between things. Mm-hmm. So keep it flat as possible, because you need to maintain it. What you don't want is steep structures that make sense to begin with, and then after 2 years, parts of the structures get irrelevant. But if they are not taken out of this setup, they will remain there and just confuse people. When they have to place documents, they don't know where to place them because they have all these orphaned parts of the structure. So keep it clean, and you can always expand and make it deeper. It's much more difficult to go the other way.
Makes sense. Anyone else in the audience having any questions?
And sorry, I have to add to the last one.
Yeah.
People are used to have very deep structures. Typically they come with from the thinking of folder structures, and they have all these folder structures, and everyone wants a folder for their documents. And when you engage with them, they bring this thinking and these wishes to the table. And when you then say, well, let's make it simple and flat, then you have this push to, oh, now we need all these branches down. But if you can hold them a bit back and give them the experience that it can actually work with a much more flat structure, then buy some time, and then I think the time will make the argument and make it easier to push it back. Yeah.
I have one question. How does, as I see this presentation here, it's mainly about engineering, product development, product document structures. How does it connect and link with the overall company document structure, which most companies have something else for?
That's a very good point, and I deliberately have focused on the technical part that is related to either the product or the process. But you're very right. There are project documents. There could be administrative documents. It could be department or any other kind of documents. And when we work with our clients, these are of course part of it. And I just didn't show them here because the time is so scarce. So I couldn't go into depth. But you have to apply the same principles to that as well. And then, of course, you will face the discussion, should these be managed in the same document management system than the rest?
Yep.
And my answer to that will be, well, it depends very much on the user interface you can provide, because you will not get any non-technical people to work directly into Windshield just to store a document. That will not work. No. So the user interface is very important. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I'm actually sorry to say that, but time is actually running out. So as always, very short. So thanks everyone for joining, and a special thanks, of course, to you, Peter. And if you have any further questions, use the chat and stay online, and you could actually try to reach out to Peter, of course, since you have his contact details. But
yeah, you call us. It's we really love this topic, so we could talk on that for hours, and all the other things that lie in engineering production. So yeah, reach out and let's have a good talk about that.
quite sure about that. And also, I mean, stay tuned. I mean, for the next week's Nordic Talks webinar, we have another one coming up with Novotech talking about digital transformation. It's not about technology; it's a way of shifting business model innovation into IoT adoption. So, with that, I wish you all having a great weekend. Thank you and bye.
Same. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye bye. Har I noget med at slukke mig?